Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Today, Donald Trump irreparably destroyed the 80-year-old post-World War II international order. His total abandonment of Ukraine in front of the cameras was on display for the entire world to see. It was a truly historic moment, not in the good way. One that I fear realigned the world order, upending the only foreign policy consensus that most living Americans and Europeans have ever known.
You're not acting grateful enough. You're not being thankful. Donald Trump to the leader of Ukraine.
Republicans are having a hard time with this. They try to move on to the next question. They express annoyance with their own constituents for asking about it. They get brusque and short in their answers. Or, like Senator Lisa Murkowski, they just purport to be really perplexed, really confused, really scratching my head. They have a hard time with this. All the Republicans do. I mean, that was right before the election. But it continued after the election. And people get so mad when I play this tape. People get very angry with me when I play this tape. And, honestly, bring it on. It makes me appreciate it all the more because clearly, at least it strikes a nerve.
Today's Oval Office meeting started to turn ugly when Trump apparently thought that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was not being deferential enough to Russian President Vladimir Putin. It only got worse from there as Trump and his vice president lashed out against Zelensky in the Oval Office. We're going to play all 7 minutes of that exchange. It happened earlier today. A lot of people at work, and you've probably seen clips. But the context here is important. Everyone should see how the president and vice president of the United States conducted themselves on the world stage.
The president's top campaign donor had installed a 19-year-old operative who reportedly personally operates websites in Russia and who has been associated with multiple criminal cyber hacking gangs. That's who the president's top campaign donor installed at CISA, giving him full access to systems and data at the U.S. government's cybersecurity agency. A 19-year-old kid with ties to Russia and cybercrime.
J.D. Vance accused Zelensky of being disrespectful. You heard the whole exchange. Who do you think was being disrespectful? I don't think it's hyperbole to say we as a country have never quite seen anything like this particularly appalling spectacle before. Once the meeting concluded, President Zelensky was kicked out of the White House without even signing the rare earth mineral deal. That's the deal that Trump wanted him to sign. He's been trying to bully him into signing to give away resources. It's the deal that Trump kept calling a raw earth deal. Trump wanted him to strong-arm him into joining on the deal and signing the deal at the White House today. That was the cost of U.S. support. Give us your minerals. We take. And then maybe we'll see what we can do for you. A planned joint press conference between him and President Trump was abruptly canceled. In later remarks to reporters today, Trump let slip the real reason he kicked Zelensky out today. He got upset because he was saying negative things about Donald Trump's buddy, mentor, something else, Vladimir Putin. That's what happened. Or, alternately, another way that today looks to me on its face is that it was a planned ambush to effectively jettison Ukraine and complete the switching of sides of the U.S. in line with, again, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance's Russia first views. They like Russia. They want the U.S. to be more like Russia. They like Vladimir Putin. They don't like democratic countries. Predictably, Donald Trump's Republican toadies practically tripped over themselves to be the first to lavish praise on this morning's embarrassing display. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who was rather quiet during much of the meeting, sitting there sullenly on the couch, found his voice on social media posting, "Thank you, POTUS, for standing up for America in a way that no president has ever had the courage to do before. Thank you for putting America first. America is with you." Meanwhile, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, who earlier this month, and I mean like a few weeks ago, on tape in front of the whole world, called Zelensky the ally he, quote, been hoping for all my life, is now also apparently on Team Russia.
Hey, speaking of things that ought to be classified, headline: How Trump's security clearances order could make the U.S. vulnerable. The plan to give temporary security clearances without background checks opens the door to breaches and espionage, experts say.
Let's be clear here. There is a lot, so much to criticize about the past 80 years of American foreign policy. I've been doing a lot of that criticizing myself for most of my time as a professional journalist, commentator. What Donald Trump is building in its wake right now, in front of all of us, with these actions, he's doing things. It's not just words. Where the United States partners itself with authoritarian regimes, sides with Vladimir Putin, against democratic allies, is undoubtedly worse than what we had before. This will have massive consequences for global politics for decades to come. The American-European alliance is effectively over. The North Star of the post-war order, where the United States' strongest alliances are with fellow democracies over authoritarian regimes, has ended.
Trump had so much to say about everything he and Putin had been through together. It was like a dictator's version of We Can Do Hard Things, if you're familiar with that podcast. It was insane.
Imagine if a foreign adversary, imagine if the Putin government somehow could just do a thought experiment. Imagine they could somehow exert control or influence over the government of the United States. What do you think the Putin government would have the U.S. government do if he could control it? What kind of headlines would you expect to see about the operations of our government under that kind of a scenario?
I mean, Andrew Nastios, who was the head of USAID for George W. Bush, was on the program and made the argument that USAID keeps us safe from it kept us safe from another 9/11 in the years after 9/11, because by stemming catastrophe and human suffering, you also counter extremism in some of the most brutal and hostile corners of the globe. That aid isn't just philanthropic, which seems to be Donald Trump's misunderstanding of it, that aid is one of our most mighty soft power tools, not just for ending human suffering, but for keeping us safe here. Another person described this as the worst 24 hours in modern American history, that we dismantle programs to spare children from dying of malaria and measles, mumps, preventable deaths and diseases, and we dismantle the World Alliance. What is Trump's endgame if you're an adversary or an ally looking at everything he's doing?
I don't want to say. I don't want to say. I can't say. Why can't you say? Why can't you say? What precludes you from saying? Listen, it's Friday night. Let's just do this. Let's just cut to the chase here. Let's do a little look-see at the landscape to see why exactly it is so hard for Republicans to deal with this topic. What exactly is so hard for Republicans to talk about? What exactly is it that we are doing, up to and including switching sides in a war? But it's not limited to that. It's all things that don't seem like good news for the United States. That makes them particularly hard to talk about. But nevertheless, with Donald Trump back in the White House, we keep doing these things relentlessly and urgently, and they all cut in the same direction. And it's really hard for Republicans to explain because of what it obviously means. It's clear why they do not want to talk about this stuff, and it gets all the more clear when you just line this stuff up. Let me show you what I mean. Here's one. Who's all that good for? Shutting down the Foreign Influence Task Force, shutting down enforcement of the Foreign Agents Registration Act, and getting rid of the task force that enforces sanctions against Russia. Who are all those things good for? Why'd we do those things? And so urgently, her first day on the job. How do you explain to your constituents who that's good for? And why we are doing that as a country. And what else? What else is hard to explain to ye olde constituents when it comes to that radical switch in the U.S. government that Lisa Murkowski described? How about this? Headline: CIA plans largest mass firing in nearly 50 years. Well, that's good for someone. Who's that good for? That came right after this. Oh, Trump's new handpicked CIA director sent a list of CIA employees to the White House in an unclassified email, giving out security clearances without background checks that look for things like, criminal entanglements, lots of debt, anything that they could blackmail you over, or any contacts with foreign governments, to make sure that you're not, secretly working for. We're not doing the background checks anymore. Trump just has ordered that the classified material be made available to whoever he says with no checks. How about when they decided that the first agency they would destroy would be USAID? Who cheered the loudest? Russia welcomes USAID cuts, calls agency machine for interfering. Yeah, it was fantastic news for someone. No one was seen to benefit more or to be more loudly cheering it on than Vladimir Putin. And that was before the specific news confirmed today that among the projects Trump is explicitly and specifically turning off right now, this week, is the program by which the U.S. helps Ukraine keep its electric grid up and running. President dressed up the defense secretary he handpicked off the cast of the Fox and Friends weekend show, put him in a bright blue suit, and sent him to Europe, where he volunteered, unasked, that Ukraine can't be expected to keep all of its own territory. He said that would be, quote, unrealistic. It would be, quote, unrealistic to not let Russia take parts of Ukraine. He then volunteered, unasked, that Ukraine will not be allowed to join NATO.
80 years of diplomacy, born of ashes and 35 million dead, undone by 1.5 men today. I think it makes America weaker, definitely. More vulnerable. It is going to make the world more dangerous as a result, no question.